Is up, y'all? Welcome back to episode 77 of That's No Moon Pod. Episode 4 of The Acolyte just dropped today. Big spoilers coming up if you haven't seen the episode yet. Really want to talk about this one because right now, as you all may know, the Star Wars fan base, the community is all going crazy over the show. Last week's episode really kind of turned it up a notch, and everyone was wondering what exactly was going to happen in episode 4. I had heard some things prior that could possibly enrage the fans even more so than what episode 3 did. So I was curious to see what exactly was going to go down in this week's episode. A very short episode, less than 30 minutes, but somehow there was still a lot of things that was worth discussing and a lot of things that has already stirred up a lot of controversy within the fan base, the lore, and just the overall story on where this whole TV show is going. So this whole episode pretty much is us following the Jedi on the Wookiee planet. Soul is trying to get Osha to come with him and his crew of Jedi to get to the Wookiee Jedi before May gets to him. She's supposed to kill him without a weapon, so she brings her homeboy who made the poison for her in episode 2. And for this episode to be this short, they managed to put in some lines throughout that I thought had a lot of meaning to it. There was some lines that I felt were really Star Wars-esque in my opinion. Um, Early on, we get Osha and she's looking at the Padawans being trained in Coruscant. She's about to dip out without telling Soul anything, but she has this cool moment between her and Daphne Keene, and them two. I could see a lot of chemistry between the two actresses. I'm really liking their dynamic. I'm hoping that they get a little bit more time to shine in later episodes. Um, One of the big things that happens early on is actually a cameo from Mundi, which came as a pretty big surprise, if I'm being honest. Before the series came out, watching the trailers of us seeing what we end up seeing in the end of this episode of this supposed Sith. Mundi is the one from the Phantom Menace who tells the council that the Sith have been extinct for a millennia. But yet, here he is in this show, part of this whole investigation to help save the Wookiee Jedi from this supposed Sith. And this was one of the things I was talking about that really stirred up the fan base and the lore pretty much right off the bat, because Mundi technically is not supposed to be alive during this time. If you were to check on Wikipedia prior to this episode dropping, you would see that the timelines from his birth to where this show takes place doesn't add up at all. But if you go and check now on Wikipedia, they pretty much just scrap that all and don't have his birth. It was something prior to BBY, the Battle of Yavin, but now it's just completely gone. So they're changing things within Wikipedia to help kind of make his appearance in this show make that much more sense. And I'm not a big fan of that, if I'm being honest. Again, the whole thing about him telling the council in the Phantom Menace that the Jedi had been extinct, and for him to be in this show at all, it just kind of feels like they're doing these things on purpose now to kind of just mess with us. And by they, I mean the people at Lucasfilm and the creators of this show. Speaking of they, that was also a talking point that I had heard prior to this episode that they were possibly going to be introducing gender pronouns in this episode, which they do, and it's not the biggest deal in the world, to me at least, the way that it was done. But there's a point to where Osha and all the Jedi are on the ship heading out to the Wookiee Jedi's planet, and there's like this rodent type creature that's with them who's like their tracker, I guess, through the forest. And Osha has a talk with the Padawan Jedi, and she asks her, is he or they, just kind of throwing in that whole pronouns thing in there for the people that were wondering if they were actually going to do that. They did. It wasn't the biggest deal, in my opinion, again, but still, the leaks were right that they actually did kind of have thrown in that thing in there. But, anyways, kind of getting back to the Kiadi Mundi thing, it's just weird that they're throwing him in there. It doesn't make sense for him to be there in the first place. They literally could have had any other Jedi, any other random Jedi, but yet they decided to throw Kiadi Mundi in there. And it is Kiadi Mundi because if you check at the end credits of this episode, it says specifically Master Kiadi Mundi played by so and so actor. I'm not sure if it's the same actor from the prequels, but it's definitely Kiadi Mundi. And there's also a Jedi that's with Soul and his little crew, Yord, um, that looks a lot like Plo Koon, but Plo Koon wasn't mentioned in the credits, and he just seems a little too short to be Plo Koon, in my opinion. He also had a different colored lightsaber in this episode at the end, but I've seen Plo Koon with different colored lightsabers before, so it could be Plo Koon, but I haven't seen anything 100% confirming that. But the overall story in this episode, a lot of it is us following the Jedi through the forest on the Wookiee Jedi's planet, while May is doing that with her poison friend maker. Um, they're both trying to reach the Wookiee Jedi before the other does, and May's having these conversations with the poison maker, and there's just these subtle things that he says to her that make you want to think that maybe this guy is this master that May is following orders from. Just some of the things that he says and some of his nuances kind of give you these hints that he's possibly the guy that's pulling the strings behind all this. I kind of have a feeling that they might try to do a misdirect because right now I feel like he's at least top two of the usual suspects going on who could be this master, this Sith Lord or whatever. And there's this weird moment to where May has to take a break. She's getting tired or whatever. And he runs off to go get her some water or something. And they're kind of going over the plan again and again, talking about how May has to kill the Wookiee Jedi without a weapon. That's kind of like the final test for the Master. And he's just giving her the reassurance like, you can do it, it's possible, we just got to get there. And once he takes off to go fetch her some water, he hears her screaming and he runs back to where May was, and he winds up getting trapped in a I Am Legend style, gets rung up upside down, and then May has like this switch up to where she's like, I'm not gonna kill the Wookiee Jedi. I'm gonna just turn myself in, yada yada. And he's telling her, you're gonna go to prison, just stick to the plan, blah blah blah. And all this kind of happened really abruptly, kind of just came out of nowhere. She was literally just kind of chilling there to rest, and then he takes off to get water, and then by the time he comes back, she screams to get him to return, and then she kind of has like this epiphany or whatever, and she decides to not go with the plan at all that she was set out to do, and she just decides that she's gonna go and pretty much turn herself in, which really caught me by surprise again because it was just so abrupt. And I don't know if something happened in her mind. Did someone somehow kind of get in her mind and make her make that choice out of nowhere? But when she takes off and leaves Homeboy there dangling, he he says as she's taking off, "But he'll kill you." And again, that's just kind of one of those things that this guy has been saying, or just the way he talks to May, that's making us try to think that possibly maybe he's the one pulling the strings. And again, the Jedi with Osha, they're just walking through the forest. This whole episode is just us following these people walking through a forest pretty much. And once we finally get to the Wookiee Jedi's cabin or whatever, May gets there first, and she bumps into that rodent thing that Osha was asking if it was a he or a they. And he's pretty much the Jedi's tracker, but he takes off ahead of them, pretty much gets lost, so we think. And May bumps into him, and he yells out these screams to let the Jedi know that May's here. She's at the Wookiee Jedi's cabinet, and May runs into where the Wookiee Jedi is chilling, and we see him there inside, sitting down, and you already could tell that someone got to him first, and it wasn't May. And they pan over to him, and the Wookiee's got just like this slash mark across his chest, sitting there completely dead. And that's when she realizes that he's here. He being this Sith Lord or her master. And right as soon as she realizes this, that's when the Jedi pull up. They're trying to get her to come out of the cabin. And this is really where the episode gets really interesting. They're waiting outside the cabin, and we're seeing Osha right behind the Jedi, and in the distance behind her, we see this dark figure like levitating slowly behind her. And then that's when Soul gets the feeling of there's this other dark presence around him. He turns around and the Sith Lord or whatever is walking towards Osha. This is pretty much what we've seen in the trailer before. The moment to where he walks up face to face to Osha, he ignites his saber. Soul tells her to run, and this crazy moment to where he just by using his fingers just force pushes Osha way out of the screen, and all the Jedi ignite their lightsabers and run towards the Sith, and he uses this crazy force push that just sends all of them way back flying, and that's where the episode ends, leaving us on a big cliffhanger and obviously wanting all of us to tune back in to see what exactly happens in episode 5. And that's pretty much everything in this episode. Again, it was a really short episode, but I think this show has been so vague with the details that it's given us. It's starting to feel like we got to start turning some corners here because there's only 8 episodes in this season. Next week is episode 5, and there's so many things that are going on. I feel like them having these short episodes are really doing this show a disservice. I think it's pretty wild that we're in this timeline to where the Jedi are supposed to be at their highest, they're in their prime, and we still haven't gotten a lightsaber fight. I was thinking that there would be at least a couple by this point. We're already halfway, more than halfway pretty much of this show. And I'm surprised that again there hasn't been one lightsaber fight. I'm curious to see what happens because if you remember in the trailers too, we saw the Wookiee Jedi seeming to have been fighting against Torben, the Jedi who drank the poison, and it seemed like we're going to be getting some kind of different flashbacks, more flashbacks at least in the later episodes. Because if you remember that scene in the trailer, the Wookiee Jedi is like coming from up above, trying to slash down on a Torben, and they both look like the younger versions of themselves that we saw from episode 3. So there could be something going down to where the witches got into the Wookiee Jedi's mind and kind of making him attack his own people. Um, but again, this show has just been so vague with the details that it's given out. It's really wanting us to try to guess certain things, try to put all these pieces together. That's one thing I do appreciate so far about the show is that it's given the people watching it some form of speculation, a lot of theories, making us try to come up with our own ideas on is Osha and May possibly the same person? Could there be like some sort of Fight Club style of storytelling going on? Is that poison maker the master that May is taking orders from? Could it be the twins' witch mother that we had saw in episode 3, the one that had carried them, because we saw that the main mother witch died, but we never saw the other one who carried them die. So it could possibly be that she survived. She obviously has this hatred towards the Jedi from what we saw in episode 3. And it could be that she wound up getting more powerful within the Force, studied some sort of, dark side training, and was able to get enough power to be able to get Osha to follow by her side and complete these tasks of killing all these Jedi that had something to do with killing pretty much her whole tribe and family on that planet of witches. So that could make sense. I could see the poison maker dude making sense of being the master as well. I could also see somehow of I think her name's Vanestra, the green bald lady in Coruscant that's pretty much telling Soul what to do and what not to do. I could see something about her that's kind of throwing me off to where I don't like her as a character, and I feel like that's intentional. We're not supposed to like her as a character. She's kind of like that stubborn, boneheaded, leader of this Jedi Council, if you will, and she's not really likable. But I haven't seen too much evidence to make me think that she could be the one being this Sith Lord Master. I feel like it has to be either, again, the witch mother or the poison maker homeboy. But either one I feel like is a little too predictable. And if it winds up being one of those two characters, I feel like it'll be some sort of be a little bit of a letdown, to be honest, because you kind of see that coming from a mile away. But now that we're getting episode 5 next week, I think things will start to get a lot more interesting. I'm hoping, at least, because a lot of the stuff from the trailer was pretty much everything that we've seen up to this point. I feel like a lot of stuff from episodes 5 through 8 wasn't shown in the trailers intentionally. So we could be seeing some more crazy things happening in the later episodes. I'm just wondering how exactly everything's gonna wrap up, because the show has been so vague, and I feel like the writing at some points doesn't do this show justice, or I feel like it just hasn't been up to a standard that we were all hoping for, at least for this show. Um, Again, there's just some things that this show has done that feel like has been almost on purpose to intentionally piss off a group of fans, or a good portion of the fans that know that, okay, if we do this thing, or we throw this thing in here, we throw this character in here, we change this here, it's going to stir up a lot of controversy. And no matter what, we post these things on Instagram and Twitter, the engagement on the post, even though it might be really negative, there's still going to be a lot of engagement, and we'll kind of use that to our advantage to get people talking about this show, at least. But you go look at the critic score and the audience score. The audience score on this show has dropped down significantly. It is really low at this point, and it's just crazy to see that this show could possibly be a blessing in disguise for Star Wars future projects, because earlier today I had seen a video talking about how Supposedly Disney has let go of a lot of Lucasfilm employees recently, and I think a lot of that has to do with this show being so lopsided and controversial. And last week I was talking about how if you're the CEO of Disney and you're given this show $180 budget, that's pretty much over $20 million an episode. You got to make sure that this show is a banger and it's a hit, and it's a hit for not just a certain group of fans that you're trying to target. It has to be a hit for the hardcore fans and the casual fans, and you got to try to get new people in to watch the show too. And I feel like this show has done the opposite of all that. And if I'm Bob Iger, if I'm the CEO of Disney, I'm looking at all this controversy and all this lopsidedness of the audience scores. Clearly, the majority of people aren't digging this show. Something's at to change. And, I never want, hundreds of people to be losing their jobs. But I feel like if there is certain people within Lucasfilm that have been not having the best track record with running this IP, something's got to change. And I think this show being as controversial as it's been so far, it could be a way for us to finally get some sort of way to get some kind of balance with Star Wars again. Kind of like how we were all feeling with Mando season 1 and 2. There's just got to be a new direction, new leadership, hopefully, because right now it just seems like they're hiring on these people to come in who don't care about the lore, don't care about if they break canon or not. And at this point, it just seems like it's on purpose. And if you're one of those people that follow the lore and what's been told in legends and all that throughout time, it just does a disservice to all the hardcore fans, especially, I feel like, because they're the ones that you really don't want to lose because they've stuck with it for so long. They've been there since day one, and they know what Star Wars is. They know what Star Wars feels like when they watch it on screen. And if you're not able to please them and you're just trying to go for a specific target audience, you're not going to have a successful show, and you're not going to have a show that's worth the budget that was given for this show. And so I'm hoping that just with all this craziness going on, that we can eventually get to a point to where it brings peace and balance back to the fandom, and we can all kind of start to get on a roll with these live action projects, because right now it's been the live action that's been the problem. The animated series that we've gotten have been great. Star Wars Visions, Tales of the Jedi, Bad Batch. We've gotten some great animation stuff from Disney. It just feels like they try to get too cute. They try to do certain things within these shows. A lot of changes. Something has to something has to happen to where we get on some sort of path of just consistency. And I'm hoping that they could somehow stick the landing with this show, but nothing so far has given me hope that whatever outcome or conclusion that we end up with the Acolyte is gonna turn things around with the fandom. I think they're already so far gone with the fan base with this show, at least, that I think no matter what happens at the end of this show, it's not gonna go over well. Nothing in this show has given me any reason to think otherwise. But I'm gonna keep tuning in because that cliffhanger that we got in this episode definitely was, I feel like, worth tuning in for next week. So I'm gonna keep doing it. I gotta see how this show ends, and yeah, I don't know, dude. I'm just again, I'm just hoping that we get to a place to where everything is just back to the way it was with Mando season 1 and season 2 at least. I'm trying to think of anything else that I could have missed in this episode. But again, it was such a short episode, and a lot of it was just us following these characters through the forest. Um, yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll just leave it at that, y'all. Let me know what y'all thought of episode 4 of The Acolyte. Leave a comment down below. Are you digging it? Are you not? I'll tell you what I am digging though is House of Dragons season 2 is back, and I couldn't be more stoked. Just as soon as that Game of Thrones theme hits at the beginning, right away, it just brings you back to where, like, oh, okay, I know this is a safe place. I know the writing in the show will be good, the acting, and episode 1 didn't disappoint. Um, I like how they didn't start us off this season with just a bang right away. They know the story that they want to tell, and they know that this fan base is already on for this ride. So they didn't need to throw in some crazy battle or a whole lot of action at all. But they're just setting us up for what's to happen in this season. Are you team black or team green? I like how they're making you constantly have this conflict within yourself on, I mean, Allison and this whole team green with the king, and you got Rhaenyra and Damon wanting to get revenge, obviously, for his son being killed. But each side, each family does these things that make you constantly kind of flip flop between which side you're actually on, which I really like. Um, but I like the setup, episode 1. Definitely the ending there that we got is just one of those classic Game of Thrones moments that really makes you just kind of clench your teeth and make you say like, wow, they actually went there and did that. Um, but that's just what Game of Thrones is. I feel like that's what makes it what it. That's when it's at its best, and that's why we all love it. It's not afraid to go there, and it's not afraid to test these boundaries and what is right and what's wrong. These people in this show are just sick, crazy lunatics and will do whatever it takes to end up on top. But I'm just glad Game of Thrones is back at least. Uh, gonna be going back and forth with that and the Acolyte until each show wraps up. But we got a lot of things coming this summer, at least. Summer's heating up. It's that time of the year, y'all. But again, let me know what y'all thought of The Acolyte, episode 4. Let me know what y'all thought of Game of Thrones, episode 1, season 2. I'll be back next week talking about both, going into more depth into each episode. Because, again, this Acolyte episode was really short. And besides the whole thing with Kiadi Mundi and that whole ordeal was kind of, feel like, one of the bigger talking points. And episode 1 of season 2 of Game of Thrones was really like the slow pace, slow burn, but it's just really kind of just setting us up for what each family's willing to do to come out on top and the risks they're willing to take. But until next week, y'all, like, comment, subscribe, posting my comic books, new releases, variant covers on my IG and Snapchat for free. Go check them out. Links will be down in the description. But until next week, y'all stay safe, and I'll catch y'all on the flip. Peace.